And now, as we were just discussing a little bit earlier, should the president have to take a leave of absence? If that has to happen, the Constitution establishes a chain of command for who becomes acting president.
Indeed. Section 3 of the 25th Amendment says until he transmit to them a written declaration to the contrary, such powers and duties shall be discharged by the vice president as acting president. Joining us now to offer a historical context is presidential historian Doug Wead, who is also the author of Inside Trump's White House, and Tom Basile, host of Newsmax's America Right Now, who worked with George W. Bush. We'll start with the historian, Tom. No offense, but is this something that is unusual? We talked about it being used 3 times.
Yeah, it is unusual, but I think it's going to be much more common in this modern age with anesthetics and with older presidents. I mean, if Joe Biden wins, how old is he going to be as president? So I think it'll be more common. And I wrote a book with George H.W. Bush, and so I talked to him extensively about when it happened under Reagan. And he held a cabinet meeting. The cabinet all came together. That was to signal to our adversaries the Cold War was still on, that the government was still functioning, don't mess around with us. And he specifically, they told him to sit in the president's chair to show that he was the commander-in-chief during this brief time. And he refused to do it. He sat somewhere else and left that Ronald Reagan's seat empty for him to take back when he returned.
Wow, that's class.
Can we stick with Doug? Just one more historical type question here. In the past, who has made that determination? Because I noticed some of the wording actually talks about the president being unable to discharge his presidential duties. Who would make that determination?
Yeah, Heather, good to see you. Actually, in the past with Reagan, the president himself and his team, Michael Deaver and others who were working on his team, cooperated with the vice president, did it. I could see that with Biden and Harris, maybe a little contention over that.
You mean in the Harris administration?
Yeah.
But as you know, it can be forced on an administration, but the odds of that happening are just
and of course, Doug, as you know, that would be the 4th section, and we're talking about the 3rd, where it's clearly voluntary.
That's right.
So, Tom, I wanted to ask you, were you involved in any way when it was invoked by President George W. Bush?
I was not, but it was made very clear that Dick Cheney was going to be the acting president for a couple of hours each time. It was invoked twice because President George W. Bush had 2 colonoscopies while he was in office. And in each time, Dick Cheney was the acting president for about 2 hours each time. I want to go back to something that Doug said. He mentioned Mike Deaver. And one of the things, Bob and Heather, that I've been seeing today, I've been watching the president's Twitter feed, and I've been watching the White House's Twitter feed. And one of the things that's very unusual about today is that the president and the White House have not released any photos or any video of the president in the residence working. That's a little concerning to me, and I think that they probably should take a page out of Mike Deaver's book. And Doug can tell you better than I can. The day after the shooting, Mike Deaver went to the hospital with papers that the president needed to sign. They showed the American people that the president was awake, was alert, and was executing his responsibilities because there was no declaration made either in the 3rd section or the 4th section after the assassination attempt. And I think that that's something that the Trump White House, if the president's symptoms are mild and he is, in fact, just working in the residence, they should show pictures and video of him on a video conference, working the phones, reading papers, even just sitting and having a cup of coffee on the couch with the First Lady. I think that's very important for the American people. Well,
we do know that there was a declaration because of storms in North Dakota that the president declared that an emergency situation. I guess there's a fine line that you walk, Doug, between alarming people at the condition of the president and keeping people properly informed.
Yes, and you know, Bob and Heather, the other guest raised a very interesting point. Nobody on TV has been talking about this, but the White House generally, no matter who's in office, protects carefully the health of the president. And usually in history, we don't know till long after they're gone. Reagan, for example, when the attempted assassination, all of the initial history books that were written about Reagan and all of the news accounts miscalculated how dangerous his situation was. It was only later history books that revealed the depth of it. And I can tell you, working in George H.W. Bush's White House, he became very ill at one point. His Roosevelt room meetings were 5 a day, and they dropped to 0 a day. And no one ever found out about it, never became public. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's more to what's happening to the president right now than we're allowed to know.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. The fact that the president got online and immediately at like 1 a.m. tweeted out that they, in fact, had tested positive for it.
Right.
I thought that it would be a little bit more along the lines of what you were just saying, Doug. But it's a whole new world with social media.
Especially from the president, whom, last I checked, had not tweeted today,
right,
which is unusual.
But in terms of someone going to the residence and taking a picture or taking some video, there are health concerns because it's COVID.
That's very true.
You know, so they have to take precautions.
That's true, too. All right. Tom and Doug, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will be back with more of American Agenda after this.
I'm trying to beat the censors, and it looks like we found out a way temporarily. If you hit the subscribe button and then the bell, you'll get notice when I'm on television. So I want to hear from you, and I want you to be able to hear me. Free speech. Let's keep it as long as we can.